want to talk about inner strength, inner space, and inner compass. Inner compass was the word that came to mind when I decided what I wanted to share with you this week. The modern ones are on the phone, but the old ones, you remember, it was a little needle and then a little arrow that kind of spins with the magnetism of the planet. Like there's this energy that we can't see that's turning this dial pointing to north. The reason I was thinking about the inner compass is last week I watched a Netflix series at the recommendation of my cousin called Escaping Twin Flames. It's not something I am particularly recommending. It's my cousin asked me to watch this documentary because her colleague at work lost her daughter to this online cult. So this poor woman hasn't been in touch with her daughter for 2 or 3 years because she got involved with the online cult called the Twin Flames universe. So I was curious and I watched it. And, you know, there was this woman who had escaped the online cult, because you kind of have to escape it, who was an intelligent, caring person. Like when you see her, you say, oh gosh, that's somebody I'd like to be friends with. That could be me. Such a nice, intelligent person, so caring and sensitive. Which kind of begged the question, how do people fall for this? And I'd like to say, oh, I'd never fall for that. And I usually do. We all do, right? Oh gosh, you know, I wouldn't fall for that. But I don't know. I'm not so sure. Because what I noticed having watched the different interviews of all of the different people is that they got involved at a time in their lives when they were feeling lack of connection. They were feeling alone. And we're hardwired, right? Human beings, we're hardwired for connection. Like we survive as a species because we work together. So there's something in us that drives us to connect with others and to want to feel like we belong in the group. So, you know, I was saying, well, these people, the inner compass was a little wonky. That's what I walked away thinking. I was like, well, you know, they were craving this connection, not realizing how connected they are already. This connection to one another exists even when we don't see it, because we've been trained to see other things. We're not trained to see the inherent connection that we have with one another. And what I mean is, for example, one example that came to mind this morning, because it's cold and wet and rainy, is, well, I turned up the heat a little bit in my house. And if you're trained in the understanding of our interbeing with one another, you can follow that line of connection really far. Like you can start thinking about the people who work at Pepco. I think that's where we get our heating from. That's a big organization and a lot of people who are working for me. They don't actually care about me, but they're actually there doing this so that I can be comfortable. Me, I myself have reached out to them and paid my bill every month. I've connected with them in this way. They've said, hey, we have this agreement. You give us some money, we'll give you some heat. Like, let's work together. Not very sexy, is it? But it's one tiny example of this vast web of interdependence, interexistence amongst us human beings. And when we don't see this kind of connection, like when we don't feel it, when we don't meditate on that connection that we have already, we start to crave it. And, I would argue that craving can be helpful up to a point, because it compels you to reach out to a friend and say, hey, do you want to go for a walk? Because you want to talk, you want to be together, you want to share, you want to be seen, you want to be heard, you want to hear someone and do that same thing for them. So that desire to connect, we're already intimately connected, but then we have a little bit of craving, a little bit of desire, very skillful, we reach out. But when we lose our understanding of this inherent connection, we become deluded and we start to feel alone. I think it's a delusion. It's an unwholesome state of mind. It's when the compass starts to wobble and not be brought into its true north. Is when we fear our aloneness. I myself am someone who doesn't like to lunch. I don't like to lunch with friends too much. Although if you invited me, I would say yes and enjoy myself a lot. But I'm a bit of a loner on some level. I love people so much, but I treasure my solitude, and it's where I find a lot of comfort. But only knowing that this fabric, I'm a part of this greater fabric, because when I lose track of that, there is a loneliness that can settle in pretty quickly. It's comforting to think of monks and recluses, these sage people who I've spent time with every year for many years. They seek seclusion in order to feel happy and content. They seek it. Maybe we don't, but they do, and it's allows them to become strong and content. So how is that possible? How is it possible to be alone and feel strong and content? So I want to talk about that today. And I would say the first and most important aspect of having your strength in solitude is this right understanding of existence. And to illustrate this a little bit better, because it's not an easy concept, to illustrate it better, I want to bring in one of my favorite philosophers, Eckhart Tolle, and read a passage from something that he published. And Eckhart Tolle, he's a modern day philosopher. He's a spiritual guy. Maybe some of you know his work. And he wrote a couple of books, and his newer one is called A New Earth. And this passage is called Falling Below and Rising Above Thought. Falling below and rising above thought. Now, as a brief background, Eckhart Tolle argues that the biggest addiction that we all suffer from is thinking. Yes, it's important to think. You need to get to the grocery store and get your dinner together. But he's not concerned about that. It's the ruminative thinking that we're addicted to, and that is harmful. So he writes, this is falling below and rising above thought. So two places where you can be instead of in thought. When you're very tired, you may become more peaceful, more relaxed than in your usual state. This is because thinking is subsiding and you can't remember your problems anymore. When you drink alcohol or take certain drugs, you may also feel more relaxed, more carefree, and perhaps more alive for a while. Because you're less burdened by your mind, you can glimpse the joy of being, but there is a price to pay. Unconsciousness. Instead of rising above thought, you've fallen below it. A few more drinks and you'll have regressed to the vegetable realm. Space consciousness, on the other hand, is not being spaced out, and space consciousness is, he's talking about rising above thought, is not being spaced out. Both of these states, unconsciousness and space thought consciousness, are beyond thought. This they have in common. The difference is that in space consciousness you rise above thought, and in unconsciousness you fall below. Space consciousness is the next step in the evolution of human consciousness, while unconsciousness is a regression to a stage we left eons ago. When you hear of inner space, you may start seeking it as if you were looking for an object or an experience, but you won't find it. This is the dilemma of all those who are seeking spiritual realization or enlightenment. Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is not coming with signs to be observed, nor will they say, 'Lo, here it is,' or 'there,' for behold, the kingdom of God is in the midst of you." How do you know that a space exists? So he's moving now into the practical, which is what I love. So he's talking about this concept of this space consciousness. So how do you know what it is? If you're not spending all of your waking life in discontent, worry, anxiety, depression, despair, or other negative states. If you're able to enjoy simple things like listening to the sound of the rain or the wind. If you can see the beauty of clouds moving across the sky. If you can be alone at times without feeling lonely. If you can be alone without needing the mental stimulus of entertainment. And if you find yourself treating a complete stranger with kindness without wanting anything in return. This means that a space has opened up, no matter how briefly. When this space opens up, there's a sense of well-being, of alive peace. It may be subtle. The intensity will vary from perhaps barely noticeable, a sense of contentment, all the way up to ananda, the bliss of being. Unfortunately, you've been conditioned to pay attention only to form. This is our cultural conditioning. Am I stylish? Is this home nice? Do I have a good taste in art? Do I have an impressive resume? These are the things we're conditioned towards that are form, not space. So you're probably not aware of space except indirectly. But there's a common element in the ability to see beauty, to appreciate simple things, to enjoy your own company, or relate to other people with love and kindness. This common element is a sense of contentment, peace, and aliveness that's invisible in the background. And he wraps it up by saying, whenever there is beauty, kindness, and the recognition of the goodness of simple things in your life, look for the background to that experience within yourself. Don't look at it as if you're looking for something. You can't pin it down and say, now I have it, or grasp it mentally and define it in some way. It's like the cloudless sky. It has no form. It is space. It is stillness. It is the sweetness of being. When you're able to sense it directly in yourself, it deepens. So when you appreciate something simple, a sound, a sight, a touch, when you see beauty, when you feel loving kindness towards another, sense the inner spaciousness that is the source and background to that experience. He has a way of describing things that I find so helpful. So I would leave it at that. However, I'm going to just add two more things. Two more ways to keep our inner strength. One is to connect the mind and body. And I'll refer to my friend who has been talking about feeling clumsy, and she has fallen down a few times more recently. And it's frustrating and scary, frankly, when it's happening in your own body, these changes. And the doctor's advice, and this is the doctor, he's gone through all the tests and gone through all these explanations, and at the end of it says, you need to connect, find ways to strengthen the connection between your mind and body, because your peripheral nerves, as you age, weaken. The peripheral nerves being in your hands and your feet. They become weak. Maybe they're like wires that are becoming frayed. So this is a natural occurrence of our body, and she's saying you need to strengthen this connection. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's great. This is mindfulness. This is our practice. We strive to move through our daily activities with attention to what we're doing. So if we're doing something with our hands, we pour our attention into those hands. When we walk, as mindfulness practitioners, the gold standard is, can we be aware of every step that we take? And this is a strengthening of the mind and the body connection. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, you're coming back to your body. Don't forget about your body. And the other tool, and this circles back to the cult. And when I think about, when people who fall astray and move into unwholesome activities, you can oftentimes link it back to a lack of connection with the body. Because the body tells us. So we ask, number 3 is we ask the body, we ask ourselves, let's back up, I'm getting ahead of myself. Am I causing harm? Am I causing harm right in this moment? Whatever it is I'm doing, we can ask ourselves right here as I'm sitting here, am I causing harm to myself? Am I causing harm to others? And you can answer that question intellectually with your mind, falling back on your values. And you can also answer that question from your body. So you feel into your body and you sense there. And what you find is when harm is being done to the self, you'll find that tension. If you look for it, you can find it. When you're doing harm to another, you can find that tension in your body. Or weariness. When you're doing harm to yourself, perhaps it's weariness. And likewise, when harm is not being done anymore, sense that subtle tone. Sense the relaxation. So, and as Eckhart Tolle says, pay attention when these moments happen, when these moments of non-harming, aka when these moments of care are available to you in your life. And they come from others, when others care for us, and they come from us. This is our strength. This is our power. We can have those moments. We can make those moments for ourselves with our intention. And when they happen by accident, when we're mindful, we pay attention, and it serves them to grow and expand. It expands that space that Eckhart Tolle was talking about.